You get what you pay for, folks. That's all I'm saying.
Welcome back, everybody, to First Ring Daily. I'm just doing Chipper on a Monday where we just toggled with the screens and did everything else for about 10 minutes, but we're back. We're back.
Can I make yet another complaint about Teams before we get started? Because
sure.
You put the show notes embedded in Teams from OneNote, which is, cool. You can do that. You can't see them from our chat. Like,
yep.
From the video, I can click over, I can go to a chat, and it's the stuff Brad and I have typed to each other or whatever. And there are options there. And the options are conversation, files, organization, and activity. But for me to, maybe activity will do it. No. So I thought I was wrong, but no, I'm right. So attached to this thing, though, is, of course, our show notes. Mm-hmm. And to see those, I have to go to a top-level thing called activity, which has no, by the way, bearing it. Well, maybe it does have some bearing on the activity from the chat. But there's a tab up there called FRD Show Notes, and that's where I go to see this. So it's like 2 levels removed from our chat and from our video. This thing is broken, dude. I'm sorry.
Well, I think I understand why that doesn't work, is because Teams and individual chat are different. But what is more annoying to me here is that actually inside our chat there is there's a little add button. It says add a tab, which in team, like when you're in a team, you can click add a tab, and then you do OneNote, which is
so we could obviously add OneNote to this, right?
Yeah, but we can't. We can't do it to our chat. We can only add Power BI or a website.
Oh boy. Living on the edge.
We were so close. Like, if I would have clicked that and saw OneNote in there, I'd be like, problem solved.
You'd be like, okay, yes. I already know that doesn't work because I tried it earlier. But, yeah, okay. I guess the only thing I was thinking was maybe because it's your notes, it's attached to your account, maybe you're the one that has to do that. So I was giving them an out there. It's possible it could have worked, but it didn't work for me.
So close, yet so far away.
Yep.
Speaking of things that are close, but also far away at the same time, Mr. Thrat is this thing, which I think I'm going to order one tomorrow. I'm waiting for, I'm just waiting until tomorrow.
So you should look at whatever bundles they have available, obviously, unless you have a place to get a good deal on these things.
The best deal I've seen, which isn't really a deal, is Amazon has it for $485.
Yeah, and if you order it now, I think, well, I know you'll get like Madden 18 if you want such a game, but I don't know. I would just look at the bundles on Microsoft.com or MicrosoftStore.com just to see, because I don't know what's there. I know there's some Xbox One S bundles right now, but there's usually bundles of both types, I would think.
Yep. So that will, I don't know, we'll see how many days it takes to ship. I'll order that probably tomorrow. And speaking of the Xbox, Paul and I have talked about this many times, but just to kind of put things into stone, I had heard from several people, one which we'll talk to here in a minute, that Microsoft was building a next-gen Xbox. Yes. Paul knows what the joke is now.
Just understood that.
Yep, Paul picked that up. But I heard from 2 or 3 people, outside of people on this podcast, that Microsoft was in fact building a next-gen console, and they're looking at cloud gaming. And the cloud gaming, I don't think, is what everyone is initially expecting, where people are thinking Microsoft's going to flick this switch, and then all your gaming is just going to be streamed. One of the scenarios that I heard tossed around was like, they said, imagine you're in a never-ending world of just walking around, and that content is dynamically generated in the cloud and then streamed to your machine, but it's only the environment. It's not actually, the first-person perspective portion, and it's going to be a migration, and that they're looking into those things, which very well could come to the Scorpio, by the way. But that's kind of where they're going with gaming, and that there is going to be a next-gen console. I'm hearing potentially 2 to 3 year cycle refresh, and obviously backwards and forwards compatible, as you would expect. And
so you've heard more about it than I have. It's funny. I've gone to this well many times. It's just the way it worked out. With Terry Myerson leaving Microsoft, there was just an incredible outpouring of discussions, and I've referenced this many times. The many people I talked to from Microsoft in the wake of that, and literally the several hours of conversations I had. And of course, when you do stuff like that, you find, they start blurting out stuff. I learned that they are, in fact, working on a next Xbox console. I've talked about how Andromeda was still a thing and what it is. And I heard a bunch of stuff. I mean, there's been people who are like, hey, this is going on and this is happening. And, and it's funny because sometimes these sources will say something like, well, you probably already know this, but blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, actually, I did not know that, but thank you.
Go on.
Whatever it might be. They just kind of assume I know everything. But anyway, I didn't hear anything specific about it other than that they are, in fact, working on it. And the reply I gave to my source at the time was, oh, I guess I sort of assumed you would be moving to purely cloud-based delivery of games to heterogeneous hardware by the next gen, and the response was kind of like incredulous, almost like no, that's like that very notion was ridiculous, like that won't be ready in time.
Yep.
For that kind of thing. So I don't know, maybe I'm just a little pie-eyed optimist or whatever, but I just kind of assumed that's where we were going.
I don't know if many people would describe you, Paul, as a pie-eyed optimist.
Well, okay, but to be fair, I mean, a lot of the commentary around my personality, my negativity, whatever, is a little off base, right? I mean, you know me pretty well. I mean, I'm certainly sarcastic, and I can't lose the Boston part of my upbringing. But no, I mean, I listen. If you're in this industry that we're in, if you're a technology enthusiast, I mean, I think by nature, you are excited for the future, right? I mean, there's a reason I do this stuff. I mean, I'm excited by technology, of course, but I think that when I think about, I don't ever approach it from like, oh, this is how this technology could be used for evil. Like for me, it's always like, this is how it's going to make life better, So, yeah, okay, I get it. I'm negative, but
first step is admission.
Yeah,
negative is. It's always interesting because people are like, you're so negative on technology. But here's the thing. Every time a new technology is announced, they promise the world every single time. And every single time they never deliver the world. It's always this fantasy thing that's going to be perfect and that life is good. Look at this Surface Book 2. It's like, this thing is going to be the greatest, but I can tell you I still have hinge issues. And so it's
there's a sure. And if you've been doing it for decades like I have, I mean, there's this sense of getting punched in the face repeatedly and then coming back for more. It's happened a bunch. And of course, for people who follow Microsoft, we can list the litany of issues or whatever. But, I think it's important to remember the good stuff and maybe the overreaching reason why we still do what we do, which is that, Microsoft has certain strengths. And when you compare them to companies that I think are kind of hubris heavy, like Google and Apple, Microsoft is a good company in a kind of a moral sense, if you will, compared to those companies. And they're a trustworthy company. And Microsoft has again, for all the problems, and I could list a bunch off the top of my head. They have a rich history of, I think, bringing technology to the masses. That there are things that used to be the purview only of these white coat lab technician types up in their Mount Olympus, dispensing information to everybody. And they look at that complicated stuff, expensive stuff, and they say, let's bring it to everybody, Yep. And there are a million examples of that. Like they really do. Again, we can point to personal. We all have our personal pet peeves or whatever, but they still do a good job of that. You can just look at all the AI stuff they're doing now. It's in their DNA.
Yep. And speaking of being in their DNA, Paul, how's the DNA of the Carbon X1? The latest iteration.
It's solid. I mean, this has always been a top pick for a laptop, or I guess I'd call it an ultrabook, really. Business class, et cetera, et cetera. It's interesting that the way this market has evolved is that compared to certain other devices in its class, it's actually not particularly expensive for what you get. For this year, they've improved it in some obvious ways. Quad-core processor from Gen 8, Intel. They have a cute little like a shutter on the camera for the privacy guys. They've added touchback if you want it. That was something they had taken away last gen for no good reason, but they fixed that. And it's there are no 4K display options available, and my only real issue with the machine is display related. It's twofold. There's the lack of 3x2. We've had this conversation. In fact, we had this conversation with the guy who made this laptop, and he agreed with me that 3x2 would be preferable. They just can't get the parts. And the other one is just kind of the weird low resolution nature of the base version of the laptop. It's it's not matte, but it's like kind of a matte-ish IPS screen. Full HD 1080p. I don't know. And the best screen you can get is only, I think it's called WQHD, which is basically 2560 by 1440, which is much preferred. I'd like to see that be the base. I'd like to see 4K, but they do have that amazing, you might remember the really colorful HDR and Dolby Vision display, which is not super expensive to upgrade to, and I would strongly recommend that, although I didn't review that version. I got the lower end version. So that's about it. I mean, aside from the display, they're kind of hitting all the right notes everywhere else. The typing experience is still very good. I'm starting to prefer these chiclet keyboards more than the Lenovo stuff, but it's still very good. The dual pointing rather is excellent. Precision touchpad, crapware-free software image, other than of course the stuff Microsoft gives you. All the right ports and parts, and connectivity is amazing. There's a cellular connectivity option. They have an amazing Thunderbolt/USB-C based docking solution, which is amazing. It's great. It's a great laptop.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what we've come to expect. Especially this, I would be shocked if it was anything less than that, because we're a couple generations into, well, more than a couple into the Carbon lineup. Yeah. And, it's a laptop. Lenovo's been known for that ever since the IBM days. So
I love it. I mean, I if this thing had a 3x2 screen, I'd probably just buy one and that would be it. I mean, it's so close. It's all to being perfect. I mean,
Yep. Almost perfect, by the way, is a File Explorer. How many years are we into this generation of the File Explorer? What, probably 10, maybe 15 years? This type of design?
It's hard to say, but I mean, if you obviously back in Windows 95, I said obviously, maybe it's not obvious, but back then they had a My Computer and a File Explorer, and they were kind of separate ways to do the same thing. I'm sure it was running on the same underlying code, but I don't remember exactly when they shored that up, but let's say certainly by Windows XP.
Have they really? Because we still have control panel and settings.
Well, I mean, just for file browsing. But aside from some performance improvements under the hood, which I also forget exactly when that happened, probably Windows 7. It really hasn't changed too much. I mean, they dick around with they added a ribbon at one point. They kind of changed which stuff you see in the navigation panel navigation pane by default, but it's the same frickin' thing it's been, since the world was in black and white, basically.
Yep. And I don't know, we've probably been asking since ever, I don't know, how long has the sun been setting and it gets dark in the evening?
Yes.
I don't know, 3-4 million years on this
Infinity
planet.
Years, yeah.
Something like that. They're finally going to add a dark theme for all those night owls. At least that's what Raf uncovered. So
I feel like Windows is a patchwork of inconsistent user interfaces, and underlying that patchwork is another patchwork of incompatible and inconsistent technologies. Obviously something so close to the, metal is the wrong word, but to the OS, the core of the OS. This thing is a Win32 app. It's not a UWP app. It may never be a UWP app, but I think people look at this kind of thing and they think, why can't it be one? Why can't it be visually consistent with the rest of the system? For Microsoft to contort this legacy code to adopting a sort of dark theme when you do make that choice in the OS, it seems like more work than it's worth. I don't understand why they don't just make this a front-end app that runs this thing in the background. Yep. I'll never understand their priorities. There are so many legacy UIs in Windows. There always have been. Microsoft did a major visual refresh in Windows with Windows XP. They did it again in Windows Vista, and then they did it again in Windows 8. And then Windows 10, I would say, is really just an evolution of the desktop UI from Windows 8. Every time they do that, they only do parts of it, and it's starting to add up, and someone on Twitter, I may write about this, I'm not sure yet, but somebody on Twitter highlighted I think it was 11 different versions of the side panels that are available just in UWP apps that come with Windows. And they're all inconsistent. They all look different. They all work different. And, if you think about something like the Fluent design system, which Microsoft is so proud of because we're not just dumping it on people, we're letting it evolve over time. I mean, basically what it's done is created now, I think we're running on 3 different versions of Windows where they just add little bits and parts of the OS that have more and more of this stuff. But there's all these other parts that don't, so it's like the new stuff does look good, I think. I mean, some people may disagree, but there's no choice, and B, it's completely inconsistent, so that parts of the system have the new style and then parts don't. And I don't know, maybe I'm probably naive, but and again, pie-eyed optimist, but I kind of wish that Microsoft would just put the brakes on to all the new baloney and just say, look, Let's get this thing shored up. Let's actually look at the feedback where people have noticed that things are wrong or, inconsistent. Let's make them consistent. Let's make this thing. How can Microsoft as a company talk about the Fluent design system with any authority when they can't get it right themselves? It undermines the entire effort in the same way that putting third-rate apps in Windows 10 undermines the UWP/Windows Store or Microsoft Store effort, right? Yep. If you don't have apps that are aspirational, that other app makers will look at and say, wow, those things are awesome, I want to make a version of that for myself, then you're just not doing it right. And they're not. Here's your article. I just wrote it.
Yep.
That's the skeleton of it, I guess, right?
Yeah, we're going to use AI, whatever. I was going to say translator, but that's not it. We're just going to transcribe this and just kick it out the front door. You got anything else for today, Paul?
Yeah, I don't know that this will happen today. There was a brief moment yesterday when I thought it might happen yesterday. That was foolish because yesterday was beautiful and I left. But I'm working on my HP NVX2 review and an associated article about Windows 10 on ARM. As you know, I've been testing this thing for some time. The thing that I wrote some review check-ins for various aspects of the system, performance, battery life, app compatibility, and so forth. And now I'm going to write the review. I'm writing the review. It's kind of a big story, I think. This is an important milestone, platform, etc. And I guess the question is whether this thing actually makes any sense at all. And I will not ruin the surprise, but I think it's important enough that in addition to the device itself, right, which warrants a review similar to what you just saw for the ThinkPad, I think a discussion needs to be had about this platform, and it's a low level of discussion in the sense that does this thing, like I said, does it even deserve to exist?
I'm looking forward
sometime soon
to that piece of the Optimist Pie.
Yes, I am a hypocrite.
Well, I think that about wraps it up for today, folks. We should be right back here tomorrow. And all things considered, have yourselves a wonderful Monday.